Hello, everyone, and welcome to an episode of Project Peak Performance. This week, I am delighted to be joined with Alex, Rob, and James, and we are going to be having a conversation all around Chris Hunt's podcast, The Green Beret Marine, where we actually covered 3 different topics, and this is going to be the agenda for this week's episode. The first thing was really around mental fortitude, mental resilience, and actually his shares and our takeaways from his experience in Marine training and what it was like to actually be a Royal Marine. So we're definitely going to cover that. Then he's moved into the psychology world, and we're going to talk about mindset and how his level of peak performance was the way he lives his life today, and in particular, some challenges that he took on for 365 days last year. And then we're going to talk about language and some of the language that he uses in communication with not just himself, but other people as well. So that's the agenda, gents, for today's podcast. Super excited to get stuck into it. I mean, James, what a guy Chris is, for first and foremost.
Unbelievable. The thing I picked up on immediately, the first second he started engaging with you and Dave, is his energy is infectious. And just I've listened to that pod now. Bearing in mind we released it Friday, we're recording this on Tuesday, and I've probably listened to it. I'm halfway through the third time of listening to it because there are so many nuggets in amongst what he shares. And there's so many worlds that I think he brings together because, as I think Dave alluded to it in the recording, you wouldn't ordinarily connect Royal Marine Commando to therapy. His business is therapy size, right? And the way he brings the two worlds together, with his energy, his passion, his enthusiasm, even when he's talking about training at Lympstone, he says it with such passion and enthusiasm. But I know Marines that have been through there, and it was like hell for them. And he talks about it like he was, spending time with his pals on the beach. So his energy for me was just immense.
Yeah, very much. He is the most energetic person I've ever met. I've had the fortune of spending some time with him face to face. We've done runs together, and he did a training day for the avocado group, and that is him. Like, that wasn't just the podcast for an hour. That is Chris, like 24/7. He is that guy. He loves life. He absolutely just loves life, and you can't help but ooze that energy off of him when you're listening to the podcast or you're around him. What was your number one thing, James? If there was like one mic drop phrase or moment or story, what was your number one thing that kind of sits in the top of the mind, thinking that's gonna stick with me? That one is there anything that you would pull out from the episode?
I don't think there was any one thing. I think we talked about it offline, and I don't want to steal Alex's thunder on it because I know that was his. But we talked about it offline beforehand. There's so many connections, and I'm just trying to trace back to the way he was saying, from a communication with his kids' perspective. I'm trying to remember the phrase he used. Help me out, lads, because I've gone a mind blank on it. But it was a phrase to do with his daughters. And
James, do as I say, do as I do, but not what I say.
And do you know what? That really hit home because I don't know about you, but we're all obviously a relatively similar age bracket. But I was certainly brought up by parents and grandparents more so, where it was like, children should be seen and not heard. And, do as I say was very much a phrase that was used quite a lot in my upbringing.
No one's too big to sweep the sheds.
Exactly.
That was a good
Exactly.
one.
And I really resonated with it from the point of view of, we use the All Blacks as the book Legacy, which I think we've all read. He referred to it, but to refer to that in my family life as well, it was a bit of a penny drop, really. Do as I do, not as I say.
No, I love that. It was very powerful talking about the family meeting and that kind of element. And I loved it when he said, he's got teenagers to a 4-year-old, and it's like, what have you enjoyed most about this week? And his 4-year-old, I love my teddies. It's so cool, and it's just genuine, isn't it?
Yeah.
Alex, you touched on some of the language that you'd noted down. Kind of absorb that part of it. What was some of your big takeaways with the 3-point agenda in mind?
Well, I've listened to this within a stream of other podcasts, including Jocko Willnick talking to Stephen Bartlett on the Diary of a CEO. So someone from a Navy SEALs background. I've listened to Mo Gawdat having a conversation with Tony Robbins. So I'm in this mode of like quite similar messages coming from a few people. like Mo Gaudat, just to touch on the point that James had just made, Mo Gaudat talks a lot about kids are there not to listen to their parents. And ultimately, the way to get kids to do something is to lead by example and almost model the behavior for them to follow. And I think he uses a phrase like, don't tell me, show me. Don't talk a good game, show me and live those behaviors. So sort of just touch on that, because that was sort of something else that linked that message massively. I think I really listen more than ever now about the use of language and the effect it can have on an outcome or someone's behavior. And he talks about the use of the word mission critical. So, you think in life, eating, drinking, sleeping, those are essentially critical things that people need to do to survive. But ultimately, do we look at training the mind, how we train our thoughts? Is that something that people see as mission critical, or is it something that's often left untouched? So the use of mission critical for me would definitely apply to time spent on the brain, thinking, thought process, and obviously the therapy sized business that he runs. So, that language of, if we're in a business, for example, and you're trying to set out a charter or standards and expectations, rather than say, here's what you should do, this is what we're expecting you to do. It's more like, these are mission critical parts of our business. These are things that people like, it's a mission critical moment. So I think that really changes how people would view certain things based on the language that's used by someone to get a message across.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Bringing it into the business model, obviously he's talking about it predominantly through the marine element of things, but I always feel that high standards build trust in a team. So from a high performance team, in management, high standards from the top bring trust throughout. And once you've got trust in a team, in that dynamic, then you've got empowerment, and empowerment brings creativity. And they're the kind of four steps towards creating a self-sufficient, highly performing team in any sort of walk of life, whether it's fitness, business, or family dynamic. But it all starts with that mission critical standard to deliver on the trust, to then let people feel empowered, and then creativity. And that's where the magic happens.
There's a lot of use of the word sort of non-negotiable, and what are our non-negotiable habits? I just think, mission critical just hits a different note. It makes people step back and think, okay, wow, no messing about there. And, you're right. If you can come together and create a set of rules, create a set of behaviors. Okay, guys, are we agreed that these are mission critical statements? Yes. Okay, well, that's how we treat them then. I think it strikes a different note.
Yeah, no, big takeaway there. Rob, touching on the military side of it, my kind of, as he was talking, I was thinking the way that they mold Royal Marines is they bust them mentally. Physically, it goes without saying, you're going to get that. But the difference that sets this military group from some of the others is that the same training happens for the seniors. So if you've got your major or your boss, effectively above you, they've gone through what you've gone through. So you've got a different level of respect for the person above you, which I think creates a lot of buy-in in the team dynamic. But one of the things that he kept referring to is how they kept pulling them from pillar to post, and talking about the mud challenge and things like that, where they beasted them in the middle of the night and then had to spin the mud top around and then clean it up 3 hours. And they're just constantly battling them psychologically. And the reason why I said that is because life is hard and missions are hard. So to create the ultimate team, you've got to go through shit to be at the highest level of performance. But in the life that we lead at the moment, that is not the message that's portrayed. It's a much softer, more treading on eggshells, remove your masculinity, that element of things. So what's your thoughts on that, Rob?
I think he touched on a lot of points that we've already spoken about, like discipline, micro habits. Because I feel like, I don't know, if you're not disciplined with yourself in installing those, then it's easy to create almost a weak person in society. And that's not to say like it's derogatory in that way, but like weak can be someone who doesn't uphold their own rules, morals, values, part of themselves. And I feel like it can be very much, we can always give excuses out there as amongst a society. It's this person's fault, it's that person's fault, etc. Like if you think about how they break people down, the only person that decides to tap out is the individual.
Mm.
There's no one else.
It connects to what Alex was saying about Jocko Willink. I've not listened to the episode, but I have immersed myself in quite a lot of his content, and it's the whole extreme ownership mentality, isn't it? And that's what I really took from it, because there was an element midway through the recording and thought, okay, this could go down quite a controversial route depending on who takes it there. And Dave has a tendency to be quite controversial, right? So I thought it'll be him that goes there. But actually, if you really listen to the message, and Chris even says it himself, this isn't an environment where people are being bullied.
Yeah.
It's not about that. It's about mental toughness and resilience. And so I think there were so many lessons that could be taken from that, where we do live in a society where I do feel like we're very much on a knife edge, where, you know, having some mental toughness and some resilience, if it's not articulated in the right way, could almost be portrayed as toxic masculinity. But in reality,
especially from an army background,
absolutely.
you know what I mean, because that is probably, say, the ultimate of the elites. You know what I mean? They go out into behind military lines and they fight man on man. You know, that's really what they're designed to do, especially in his elite environment. You know, they are literally in. So, you know, like that, like I think Dave alluded to it. You've got that side to it, and then you've got the therapist, like, you know, the therapy side to it, and they're two polar opposites from what people would believe. You know, people would believe therapy is go in a room, sit on a couch, have a cup of coffee, and just talk yourself, and someone gives you some stuff and goes away. And then you've got this elite military mindset that gets beasted in the mud, fortitude mindset. You know what I mean? So two polar opposites in what that could be, but equally at the same time, you have to have a strong mind to be able to do the physical side. And that's what Chris really was putting on, where he said he flipped that model. A lot of people go to the gym, they work out, but sometimes the mindset might not necessarily be there for everyday life.
I think I was, you know, I was in the gym this morning, so I go and use an app now, where you basically plug in your last sort of reps and the weight that you delivered, and then next time you look back on it and you have, you know, it's all about edging up the weight each time. There's so many people that I'm in there on a morning with that are just there. You know, there's nothing wrong with sort of social gym. You know, they're there with someone else, they're chatting. There's a lot of time between reps. They're always doing the same weights. You know, just because it's a routine, it's a comfort zone element. You know, for some people they'll be happy with that, but when you're looking for growth, whether you're looking to, you know, improve at something strength wise, whatever it may be, then, you know, it's all about sort of continually to step up what you're doing. The sort of conversation on comfort zones was absolutely fascinating for me. I just thought it'd be great as an individual in life almost to have that officer type person with you day to day, just always being like, don't do that, do this, do that, and almost like challenging you each day. It's like a little sort of metaphor for what would my inner officer say? How would they push me out of a comfort zone right now? You know, what am I going to do differently? Can I get it 10 minutes earlier than I did yesterday? I went to the gym at 6. Can I do it at 5:45? You know, just anything to sort of make it different, I think is key, rather than just gliding along on autopilot.
There was 3 quotes, and I jotted them down into my notes when I was listening to it, and maybe each of you can touch on them. But the first one, you earn the green beret. It's a rite of passage. You want to leave it in a better place than how you found it for the next person. And that was one quote around the Marine Corps. That was when you talk about, you know, kind of the bullying element, which it obviously wasn't. It was about fine tuning it, but he felt earning that green beret was a full rite of passage, and the goal as a Royal Marine is to evolve the Corps, evolve, you know, the Marine dynamic structure, models, processes, and team, so that the next people coming through receive it in a better place. And that was like, when I look at, with, you know, link things to parents, or you link things to the generation, the economy, the country, you know, anything, if you can put that mindset to something you're touching today, that's so powerful, right? You know, that is such a great way of looking at life, or the thing that you're focused on, that one thing that you're doing today. And that for me, I was just like, wow, that's so insightful to see from, you know, from someone that's come from that outlook. Because, you know, when we talk about the All Blacks and you talk about that side of things, all these high performance, peak performance groups of people, that's ultimately what people are trying to do. It's a higher purpose, isn't it? It's not just about their career, their moment, their life. It's about the bigger picture, to the lifelong goal. So that was a cracker for me, James. You know, what's your thoughts on that? You're a big visionary on, you know, long-term thinking. So what's your takeaway that links into that one around rite of passage and leaving it better than you left it, James?
I think it, when you said it then, I thought to myself, when you connected it to everything you touch in life, it just, I don't know, makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up a little bit for me, because you kind of look at it and go, it's so transferable. It doesn't have to be connected to military. It doesn't have to be connected to the sporting world. It could be connected to day-to-day life, you know, and all of us are in businesses where we have people that are, you know, closely tied to us, and they're in some fashion or another, their livelihoods and their futures can be shaped and supported by our influence. And I kind of look at that and I go, that sometimes you look at your purpose and you go, where does it sit? I know some people have issues with purpose. Dave's mentioned it himself. You know, he's achieved so much, but sometimes feels like he's lacking purpose at the moment. But actually, if we reflect on the person that isn't on this call, Dave is the example. He's touched and influenced all of our lives in some way, and his purpose is to support others. And he does that just naturally. And equally in our own businesses, and the way, you know, Rob, you're obviously a performance coach. Ian, you run multiple businesses. Alex, you're at the top of your business. We all have that necessity, if you like, to show up and help people on their journeys. And I just think that connection to that rite of passage, I guess we're having to create our own. We're having to create our own rite of passage in the way we support and develop those around us.
I think that's something that we should be looking to uncover with the group that's obviously coming to the meetup on the 10th of May. You know, that's quite an interesting topic that we could talk about, you know, climbing the mountain that we're going to climb at 7 a.m. Who's got that? Who's got that kind of that rite of passage, or that one thing in their life that they're trying to deliver to such a high level that it's not just about completing a task, but it's about creating something that can flourish after they're not using it. You know, it's quite powerful thinking. So yeah,
so you put it from like Maslow's hierarchy of needs I've got up here, and you look at that from a triangle perspective of what is the peak of that: self-actualization, desire to become the most that one can be. And that's like the ultimate drive for purpose. After that, it's esteem. So respect, self-esteem, status, recognition, strength, and freedom. So like, you know, below that, love and belonging. Below that, safety needs. And then below that is psychological needs. So primal instincts like, you know, shelter, food, basics, like Chris was talking about. I mean, it goes back to like habit stacking. It's like, how do you get from psychological needs, you habit stack, the next one, love and belonging, the 90-second hug he was talking about, like respect, self-respect, like you build your disciplines, you self-respect yourself, you say you're going to do what you said you're going to do, turn up to the plate. Ultimately, then you get to the point where you're so self-empowered that it's not about taking on anyone else or competing with other people. It's about, how do I then support others on this journey that I'm going on?
And you mentioned the magic D word, discipline. I know we speak about it quite a bit. Even to the story of he said about in the airport.
Amazing.
been on a plane.
One thing I'd like to point on that, one thing I really took away from it was the words he said, because he called Keystone Habits. One thing he said is move, not delete.
Okay.
And like, it's really resonated with me. Like, I've got a thing in my kitchen that's got like I basically, anything I don't do, I said I'm going to do, I put it on there, and it stays on there every morning. I get up and say, right, so 2 weeks ago, I had a bit of a meltdown, so I had to do a 36K, and I put on there, I owe myself a 36K run. So I knew that I had to go and do that as part of my additional training program to then cross it off. So like, you think about it from move, not delete. How many people have got stuff in their diary that they just delete out or put it on to-do list, but actually that, I'll move it to 7 o'clock tonight when I'm sitting down watching TV and actually do it. Then it just being oh, I forgot about that. I should have done that 3 weeks ago.
Keeps the progress, keeps the momentum, keeps
No
the
zero
goal in
days.
sight.
Discipline is like the stacking part of discipline. I think the common thing that Chris was saying about was like the small bits, the three things you say before you go to bed. What are you grateful for when you wake up? Like the small things. I think a lot of people try and start to go, right, I want to be peak performance. But you know this, Ian, well enough. Like imagine when you started running to where you are running now, your capacity of what you can do now. Imagine if you said, right, I'm going to go and do a 50 miler, 100 miler. At your initial stages, it's not physically possible. You had to stack the time and the discipline to get to that position. And people don't necessarily see behind all of it, the amount of hours that takes physically as an individual to actually achieve that.
And a quote that he used around discipline, which again I love, was it's all about discipline, the honest hard work.
Mm.
And again, the power of language, the honest hard work, the amount of people in life that it's just a throwaway comment of I'm too busy to do that, or I'm just so busy at the moment. It's like, well, how much of that is honest, value adding hard work, effective hard work that's going towards some greater purpose or meaning? It's just an easy thing for someone to say when they're a bit distracted with whatever they can fill their time with. And I just thought that phrase summed it up perfectly, and obviously links into what Robbie said about Ian with his running, all that honest hard work, what happened behind the scenes in the dark that allowed him to sort of allows him to shine in the light. Absolutely love that phrase.
Yeah. I've had an old client that brought up a story on that part. It's like an old client who wanted to record some videos, right? And videos we all know are hard to try and get on a camera and sort it out. So I said to him, right, let's break it down, one video a week to get you a 16. He was like, no, I'm going to do this 16 in one day. I said, it's going to be tough. He kept on putting his diary. Every week went by. 5 months later, still hadn't done one. And the core value behind him every time he said that he was trying to do it was no excuses. And that was the core value of their business. So on like month 5, I got to the point where I said, we've had these conversations, no excuses behind you. You've had 16, 17, 20 weeks now of excuses.
Don't tell me, show me. Yeah.
Yeah, you can really break those projects down. At 11 o'clock today, I had my video guy, Martin, come in for a meeting with me because we're designing a documentary, a 3-part series documentary. And we were going through all of the bits. And afterwards, we kind of looked at some of the shoots and stuff. And he was like, this is a big project, isn't it? And I was like, I reckon 100 hours. And he looked at me and he was like, bloody hell. And I was like, but that's why we're meeting today, because we're going to deliver it in 12 months' time.
Mm.
So it's 2 hours a week. And 2 hours a week is easy, but 100 hours is a big job. But when you break it down, if we miss 10 weeks of 2 hours, we won't make the year cut off. But if we stick to it and just do 2 hours a week, which is not difficult, between two of us, working 40-hour weeks or whatever, it's a small percentage. But the key comes to the move, not delete, like you said, Rob. And one of the other quotes that I've got here, and this is big for me because I think a lot of people can take a lot from this in general society as it stands at the moment. When you are an enthusiastic person, you're disciplined and you're driven. If you say you're going to do something, you do it. And that was big because I was like, I'm on this thing at the moment around where people are talking about it's not the journey, it's the destination. And I'm calling BS on that because it isn't. Because running an ultra marathon, for example, it's not the 99 miles, it's crossing the line. That's what it's about. It's not the training. It's about finishing and achieving it. Building a business is not about planning a business, getting it to the point of website launch, but it doesn't break even and it fails. It's about delivering a business that's going to pay for your life. And achieving your goals in the gym, Alex, is not about going to the gym every day, like you're saying, coasting through it. It's about delivering on the result that you want, which might be endless, but it's about taking your top off in the summer and going, fuck, I'm fit. That
There's,
is what it's about, right?
you've called BS on what you call BS on. You know, the enjoy the process sort of phrase. I think more and more I'm thinking, fucking get in a process that you hate, get in a process that is hard and shit, but ultimately it's going to help you grow. You know, why did Chris Hunt go into the Royal Marines? He wanted a challenge. He wanted to do something that scared him. You know, go like they say, bison, when there's a storm, they run into the storm to get out the other side quicker rather than always chasing away from it because it will catch you eventually. So yeah, just most things worth doing that's going to help you grow are probably not going to be that enjoyable. But ultimately, when you come out the other side, you'll feel amazing.
I've got a
Yeah.
question on that then. Do you feel that disciplines are things that are enjoyable or enjoyable? So if you enjoy it, is it a discipline? Or is it like, I don't know, something that's a ritual?
For me, discipline is having the ability to do the things you know you need to do when you're not motivated to do them.
Mm.
Motivation is doing the things that you want to do at the moment you want to do them because you're motivated. But discipline is what he was talking about with that 5K every day. He said 70% of it was all right. He enjoyed it. 20% of it was, oh, it's a bit of a ball ache. 5% of it really didn't fancy it, you know, really grinding his teeth. And the other 5 was like absolute procrastination, zero idea of doing it. 8 hours of carrying kids around Disneyland in the sweltering heat, having to get back absolutely wrecked after doing 36,000 steps and having to go out and run 5K on your family holiday in the heat, not feeling it at all. And discipline is about the 10% that you didn't want to do, not the 70% that you enjoyed doing, really, for me. That's the way I see it with my training. And
you
I
saying in on
train,
that, would you say his 70% is motivation
yeah,
and then the rest of it is discipline?
yeah,
Yeah.
I would say so. And probably that 70-30, 80-20 rule probably applies to most things.
I think Ian, just relating it back to your quote about calling BS on sort of what you did, I think it also comes back to what someone's purpose is. Like you've obviously got a greater purpose than just to finish a certain race that you've been building up towards. Like, you know, Johnny Wilkinson talks about winning the Rugby World Cup. That was his purpose. That was what he was working towards. They won the World Cup. And then, you know, a few seconds later, he felt like, oh shit, I've done it. I'm 30. What am I going to do now? So it's about getting that right purpose, I think, as well. So it expands beyond just a defined finish point, a bit more of an everlasting sort of reason for doing what you do.
Yeah, I think taking it away from running, you know, if you look at it, you know, me and James have started businesses, similar sort of time, similar sort of setup, different in their own right. But the journey of where we are today, you know, if we say our businesses are now successful in their own right for the context of how long they've been in the world, but the enjoyment part is to reflect and look at all of the hard work that you put into it to get it to today. It didn't mean that for the first 6 months, I enjoyed working 15-hour days, 7 days a week. I didn't enjoy that part. That's not, don't in that journey of that getting to this destination was not enjoyable. It was mission critical to get us to this part. It was ultimate discipline. 70% of the time, I loved getting up at 7 o'clock in the morning, throwing on the pink hoodie and learning the new skills and being shit at them to work through and get there. But 30% of the time, I didn't enjoy that. You know, there are things that you missed seeing your kids do, your friends doing stuff that you couldn't do. You know, there are times when you'd go to the shop in the first 9 months of launching a business, James will relate to this, and you think, oh, I'd love to shop in that aisle, but I can't. I'm shopping in that aisle at the moment because there's no fucking money coming in, right? And that's not an enjoyable process. The enjoyable part is the destination, is actually arriving there with a win cap on and going, wow, that hard work paid off. But it doesn't mean it was enjoyable. So if you're doing something that's a difficult challenge and it's hard with a goal in mind and you're not enjoying it, don't be put off by that phrase. Just battle through, be the bison running into the storm and get to the destination and then actually enjoy it. You know, don't be Johnny Wilkinson and not enjoy it. Embrace it and enjoy it. And I think, James, probably from a business point of view, maybe you relate to that as well, I would say.
Yeah, I think on the main, I do. I suppose there's a part of what you shared that could be deemed, well, it is controversial. Enjoying the process is a popular statement that gets bandied around at the minute. And I think that's just to be really clear. There are parts of the process in building our businesses that we will have enjoyed, but that was just by virtue of the fact that we were on that journey. So it's okay to enjoy the process, and it probably helps the process and helps get to the win quicker if you do enjoy what you're doing. But equally, there's going to be 30, 40, and in some cases 50, 60% of what you need to do to get where you want to go that you're not going to enjoy. It's bullshit. You hate it. Every day you look at that task on your task list and go, I really don't want to do that. But you have to do it. They're the things that will make the difference. They're the things that will get you to the win. There are people that will get to the result they want far quicker for the fact that they can suck it up and do the things they really don't want to do.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Most relevant.
I think that's it. I think it's that more needs to be talked about with the mindset of what happens at that tap out moment. What happens at the point where 80% of people would, yeah, I can't do this now. Like, what is the mindset at that point that separates those that do versus those that don't? They say in the Marines, don't they? And David Goggins talks about it that, when people are fucked, they're only really 40% fucked. And there's an extra layer where the elite go to, which is it extends beyond what others are able to do. So, that mindset of it's not going to beat me, it's not going to defeat me. Jocko Willink sort of was asked the question of what is it they're testing through the Navy SEALs recruitment process. He said, will you keep going? So Stephen Bartlett said, in the face of, and then he answered, whatever. Like, it's almost like a enjoyable challenge, but knowing you're going to put your body or your mind in a position where it's crying for help, and you're gonna help it come through that challenge.
I think Goggins once said it about, they asked him, why does he train? Why do you put yourself through this? And he said, I put myself through this so that at 3 o'clock in the morning, if I get a call that my mum's passed away, I'm ready for those moments in life.
Mm.
And so it's like the prevention part to it. It goes back to what we we're talking about, resilience prevention, toolkit that Chris has got to prevent you from, when you get to those tough bits, you've got those strategies all in place that keep you going in those 5% moments, those little 5% moments that are the tough moments you might find.
Yeah, I think on the goals and on the dynamic of business, family, fitness, whatever it may be, the way I see it, when you're looking at passing the Marine training program, you can't 70% pass that. You either pass or you don't. You can't 70% complete a marathon. You've either completed it or you haven't. It is not a 70% thing. You can't 70% be a good parent. You were either a good parent or you weren't a good parent. Now, I know there's a grey patch somewhere in the middle, but you either gave it 70% or you gave it all you could. And you can't 70% create a business. It either is the business and it continually evolves, but it's the goal that you designed in your head, or it isn't. And the finish line, if we're talking about Rob's medals over his left shoulder, was either achieved or it wasn't. And to go back on the point of discipline and the enthusiasm that Chris is talking about and where his headspace is, it is that 30%, 10%, 20% that you don't want to do, that you procrastinate on, that you find difficult, that is not enjoyable, that is hard. That's the percentage of achieving it or not achieving it. The 70% is the easy part. It's not easy, but it's the easiest part, because you do it with a smile on your face. You will have all of us will have moments where you go in and you go, right, I love today. Like, I've fully earned my sofa, Joe Rogan style, sit down. What a day, made a difference, had an impact, left the business in a better place, trained in the gym, got dinner with the kids. Everyone was happy. Kids had gone down to bed. What a day. Sit down, watch Naked and Afraid on Discovery Channel or whatever you're watching at the time. And you just love that day. And then some days you just have a shit day. But that's probably the day that's the big difference. If you still ticked all the boxes and you didn't enjoy it, that's the difference between the average and the peak performers, I would say. Sorry, James, you were about to say something.
I was literally just going to tab onto what you said around the 70% is the easy bit. The 70% is the showing up, right? The 30% is where you make the difference. The 30% is where the good become the elite, the average become, you move through the phases. I think the 30% is what people reach. And like Alex, you said, that phrase of you feel fucked. Well, no, you're not. You've still got 30% left in the tank. And whether that's physical, because I think the one thing I don't want to dilute this episode with around Chris's military background is it's not just about fitness and physical capability. For me, his episode was probably more, certainly in the way I received it, so much more about mental resilience than physical. So much more.
Well, if did you guys watch the marathon at the weekend? London Marathon. I mean, in both races, you had the men. There were two men side by side with probably what 4 kilometers to go. Then there were four of the women that were all sort of grouped up together, probably with 1.5 kilometers to go. And at that point, you can't imagine, and you'll know better than me. Certainly Ian, Rob, running the distances you do, the discipline that would have gone into sort of the training, physically, the nutrition, how they live their lives. There can't have been much difference between those people. But I was watching it with my two boys, and I was like, one of these is going to win, and it will be probably down to just that mind power, or just them just taking the initiative and wanting it slightly more than the other person. What was your reading on that? Would that be about right? Do you think it then comes down, that extra layer comes down to the mind, or is that a bit too simplistic?
I think it comes down to all of it. I think we don't know the training that they've put in. Some may have trained that little bit harder. Some may have slept that little bit more disciplined. Some may have had a better dietary plan. On the day, some may have had that mental resilience to go, no, I'm pushing for this. I'm gonna do it. I actually loved, more than the winners of the men's race, I loved the two British guys that were with 10K left to go, just inside and outside of the top 10. And the guy that came third, I don't know if anyone noticed or seen the story, but most runners run with an expensive heart rate Garmin. This guy ran with an Argos catalog Casio watch.
Yes.
Because he felt he wanted to feel the run. He wasn't influenced by technology. He just ran with the feeling and didn't know that he finished in the top 3. He had no idea he finished third until the announcer.
And his splits here were like so close, each split. Like not even much far apart. For me, I actually like the end part of the marathon. The people who are like, I shared a story about a guy who's got cerebral palsy, gets to the end. Like people who are doing the marathons at weekend, I'll still send them saying the overall population of the world who runs a marathon is still 99, goes back to what Chris was saying, 99% do not apply. And I've always believed, as a still class myself as a non-runner to the eyes of the elites of someone like Ian, mine's always been mindset over anything else. And so, like, when people say, I could never do a marathon, it's like, no, it's not that you couldn't do it, you just don't want to. That's the fact of it. There's no issues with that, but everyone has it. Like, my mum was 65, never run before in her life, ran a marathon within like under a year. So what's your excuse if someone that's got cerebral palsy can achieve it? But it's like, you're in it, either in it or you don't want it. And it goes back to that thing, like, halfway through training, I've known so many people, Ian will probably tell you as well, halfway through training for a marathon, they get with a bit of a niggle, the why's not great enough, and they go, I'm just not going to do it this year, I'm going to defer it. Where actually the training is the bit, those 5% bits where it's like horrible, you don't want to do it, but you still go through it. And those are the bits where you stretch yourself to that next level. I see a lot of time in business where people stretch up, it gets chaotic, it gets stressful, they either pierce through it or they come back to comfort level because they're like, no, it's just too much for me. But actually, what they forget is that's the bit where it's the magic happens. That's where you go into elite status.
Yeah, totally. So I think, to answer your question, Alex, I think it's all of the training, and then on the day, someone once said to me, on the day for a race, it's better to be 90% healthy than 90% trained. So it's basically, it's better to be in the right mind space, healthy, and only trained 90% capacity, but 100% ready, than it is to be feeling like you've had the perfect training plan, but you feel 10% exhausted, lost, not well, whatever it may be. Because the mind can make up the difference for the training, but if you're mentally stressed or not quite there, or a little bit lacking of energy, or not quite knowing what your purpose is on the start line, then that's a bigger impact. So yeah, probably mentally it does have that bigger difference, I would say, for sure. I think that does play a big part of it. And that's the
Ian,
third quote, actually. Sorry, Rob, go on.
sorry, I've got one question for you before I forget it. Chris did some stuff with you, didn't he? You're one of your guys.
Yeah,
Right?
he
And
came
you
to
always
one of
talk
our
about,
events.
you know, I remember coming to one of your meetings, you talked about it being almost a Royal Marine set, each man side by side. You see that every partner leans on every partner. What did a session with Chris do for someone? Like, you know, have you got any wins from that day that you could probably say that helped partners in there, in case someone is thinking about getting someone like Chris into their business or working with someone like Chris?
Well, it was about 2.5 years ago, and I think Chris Hunt is a different person today than what he was 2.5 years ago.
100%.
But 2.5 years ago, he still was the same energetic, infectious personality that he is today. He's just got more tools in his toolkit. We had this conversation on WhatsApp recently because we kind of knew each other at a similar time. So we've kind of both evolved at a sort of rate together, be it not together. But one of the things that he did in his session was to link your personality to the animal kingdom. And he had all of these different animals laid out around the room. And you had to go and stand by the one that you felt you were most linked to effectively, and then explain why. And really had nothing to do with the animal itself, but how you were describing your own personality was the key part of it. And it was quite interesting because you could see a split with the positive and the negative people in the room, by how they articulated themselves. And the agenda was to use the animal personality to describe yourself. It was irrelevant what the animal was. It was just the description you gave of yourself. That was quite an interesting exercise for me as a leader in the room, to see how people were effectively describing themselves was very interesting, to then see the room unfold honestly without them realizing which corner of their mindset they were sat in, basically. So that was quite an interesting exercise. But I would imagine Chris has got a whole different set of tools that he uses now. But that was the one thing that kind of I remember. The other quote that he had, which links to all of this: at the right time, at the right place, magic can happen. He was actually talking about kind of in the Marines and some of the other stuff, but it does make me think of what you're just talking about there, Alex, you know, with the marathon and stuff like that. At the right time, at the right place. Well, what's the right time and what's the right place, and how much has gone in to the ice below the iceberg to be that peak? And that, I think, is quite a good question for people to ask themselves, you know, that are listening, is what's the right time for me? What's the right place for me? You know, what are you moving towards? What is the moment? What's the cutoff? What's the location? What's the goal? And what are you going to do to get there? You know, I always love looking at Google Maps these days, because we were looking at the Peak District with Mike, because he was like, it's a 4-hour journey. I was like, it's a 3-hour journey. So anyway, we looked in Google Maps. At that time, it was like 2:55 or something. But then it was like, I think it's 102 miles. And I was like, oh, so I could run that. How long would it take to run it?
It's more than 102 miles from you, I can assure you
Well,
that.
whatever it was. But I remember just thinking, oh, I wonder if I could run that. So it's like these little things, but what is the destination? What is the location? You know, in everything that we do today, what are you trying to achieve? You know, what's the time cut off to achieve it? What is it? What does it look like? At the right time, at the right place, magic can happen. You know, what's your magic you're looking for? It got me thinking, you know, big time, actually. So that was one as well. Alex, thoughts? You know, do you think that typifies the elite winners in races, in competition? You know, football's obviously your background. What do you think?
Yeah, I think the term of use magic, you know, I think that you have to have put a lot of work into something to earn the right to create the magic. I've never been a sort of a believer in luck and just something completely magic happening out of the blue. Like, you have to have done something, even if you win the lottery, you've still bought a ticket. You've done something towards that goal. So I think magic is almost the moment where that flow state where something happens that's just it's almost meant to be because of what has gone into that beforehand. You can't just turn up and you can't turn up for the marathon having not trained and expect to be running with those guys with a chance of winning. Like you've got no chance. So
Did you see the girl? Did you see the girl from
last year
2019?
was it was it
Mm.
is it the she was in the Olympics, weren't she?
She did her first marathon in 2019 as an average Joe, I think 4.5 hours, and finished like 7,300 and something, and then got
Wow.
addicted to running. And in 2024, she ran with the elites and finished
I
60.
saw I saw a post on this earlier, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I
she
did
said
see
she's got no running background. She wasn't a district runner, cross country runner. She started running for that marathon, and then with discipline, with training, with a clear goal, she looks completely different, obviously. But she went from 7,000th to 16th and ran with the elites, British girl.
I think that ties in with the right place, right time. I agree with the statement, but what Alex has said there, I think people must understand the right place, right time is the effort that has gone in to lead to that place. So that girl is an amazing example. 5 years ago, she was entering her first London Marathon. 5 years later, she's now competing with the elite and finishing, did you say top 60?
16th.
Sorry, so top 20 in the elite of the elite. And that just goes to show with time and commitment and boring consistency. It's a phrase we use a lot in our business. It's you got to become consistently boring, or boringly consistent rather, to reach the levels if you want to reach those levels. And I think that's the big thing. The other thing I was going to say off the back of what was shared with that statement is what is the right time and the right place for people? I think so many people live for the moment, they live for today, they don't have a goal, they don't have a sense of direction. It's just I show up, I go to work, or I go to the gym and I lift weight, or I run on the treadmill or whatever. There's no actual destination that they're working towards. And so say again.
Fucking start. Simple as
Yeah.
that. Like stop. That girl that you said about, her actual first marathon was a virtual marathon. So
Was
there was
it?
no crowds, no finish line properly. It was all virtual. So she turned up to the plate and did it in her head with no one out there. So, but she started. That's the bit I always say to people: just fucking start.
Yeah.
Like if you've got something you want to do, you're always going to be shit at the start. But with time and effort, discipline, motivation, all that side to it, that whole just turn up, do it.
A start's almost more important than the discipline because Sandhurst have a rule that says hesitation kills,
Mm.
and ultimately it's all around committing. Don't double think it. So you have to start to be able to then be disciplined at something. So you're right, start, and then it's how much you want to sort of see it through. But any hesitation, that's when people talk themselves out of doing stuff. Oh, it'll be all right if I don't do it today. I'll do it in a week or so, or let's start again in 3 months when I feel a little bit more ready to give it a go. Can't do it. Don't want it enough.
I think the circle that you put yourself in as well makes such a big impact to this. This is not this. Ultimately, it is a solo life, right? We live our life in our head, but the people that you share the work with, the people that you share the enjoyment with, and the training with, and the disciplines with, has a big impact. Sometimes you have to shed a friendship group because you've outgrown them or you want to outgrow them, and that can be difficult and portrayed as negative, but you're doing it for the right reasons.
Mm.
And one of the things that Chris was talking about with all the marine training, he said, when you see a really good oppo on the verge of quitting and struggling and having a bad day, everyone gets around them. Everyone stops that, everyone brings them back up a level because everyone has those moments, right? Whatever scenario you're in, business wise, I remember looking at my last £1,000 in my bank account at one point thinking, I fucked this up. But we hadn't. The money just was in the business account, not in my account. And I just hadn't been paying myself. And it was then you're like, wow, realization moment. And the same thing with the difference with marathon running to ultra running, that me and Rob have been talking about is there's points where you want to quit, when you want to stop. And that's the hardest part of the run. But on the finish line, that's the first thing you remember, is that moment I had 6 hours ago where I was ready to sit in the chair and tap and call the missus and go home. Didn't happen. And the finish line, that's the first thing you remember. And the same thing in life, you know, sometimes a relationship, sometimes parenting, the magic, the pivot needs happening, but your circle is vital. I think, you know, your circle. We're fortunate that we've got this nice group of the 5 of us, which has helped a lot, I think, all of us over the last 12 months. But your day-to-day circle is so important. You know, who you have kids with is so important, and who you go into business with is so important. And your PT or your mindset coach or your nutrition coach or your mental health coach, whatever it is, these people are so important to get you to your goal. It's not just solo, but if you pick the wrong crew, pick the wrong team, it's not going to be a lot of fun.
I always use the analogy of charging batteries. So I say to people when they talk about, oh, I've got this friend or I've got this thing, say, do they recharge you or do they drain you? But also, is it reciprocated? You got to recognize with your own self-awareness, are you going to them always and just draining them down? But if there's someone you keep seeing over and over again that's draining your battery, you feel deflated every time you meet them, then you need to obviously change those boundaries. And like I said, change that circle. You need those people that go, like he said, push, wasn't it? Someone struggling up a mountain, whether it was like the other one gets behind them, just keeps pushing them along until they find that second win.
Yeah, absolutely. Any more takeaways? He had the 3 things tool, which was fantastic. Just having the last thought before you go to sleep, 3 positive things: gratitude, thankful, positivity, training the brain to go to bed feeling good rather than bad. That was a big thing for me as well. And then I just loved some of the bits that we've covered, and that, you know, sort of put those in the notes here that we kind of spoke about, which I'll use in some sort of program somewhere or another. But anyone else got any other little bits they wanted to cover?
Yeah, it was a brief one. We've touched on it in this, and he mentions it quite a lot. But it's the reference to no 0 days. So once you commit to something, no 0 days, no matter what. And the main one for him was around working on that mental well-being, the breathing exercises, etc. The no 0 days. I think people really need to embrace that. The same way as you, like you said, brushing your teeth, eating, breathing. No 0 days around working on the mindset and mental well-being.
Yeah. So much synergy forming with these elite people that we're talking to. And in the reviews could be the same review. It's kind of, you see the pattern is really becoming clear here. So if you're someone that's not absorbing that and not feeling that, you know, come and meet us at one of our workshops. We've obviously got one happening on the 10th of May. There'll be another one, but I think some people need it on one-on-one or in a bit more face-to-face group session. That's why we're doing those. We're excited to do those. I think a special thanks to Chris for this episode. We spoke for probably about an hour or so on this one. Probably could have gone on for longer as well. But yeah, special thanks to Chris and all of our guests as well. And Dave, we hope your knee feels better soon, mate. And it's ready to climb that peak mountain for Project Peak's Performance first meetup. If you want more details on that, there are a few posts in the group, or you can reach out to any of us privately. I think there are only 2 or 3 tickets left. So don't procrastinate. Don't hesitate. Join us for that event. Thanks, everyone, for joining in.
Cheers, guys.